Now, more stories, insights, and analysis of Illinois policy and politics. This is Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Opportunity Project. Once again, your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan back with Joe Kaiser on this edition of Rising, and Joe, Sinclair Broadcasting, which is taking over, among other properties, the Tribune Company's radio and TV properties here in Chicago. They were bandied about the left-wing echo chamber, the D.C. press corps echo chamber this week, for a story that Deadspin ran that included a little bit of a mashup, a little bit of a montage of all their network affiliates reading from the same playbook as it pertains to their mission statement, Sinclair's mission statement, for news coverage. Here's the clip that made its way around and led to the high dudgeon from all of the media mavens.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Aren't they clever? And so this is an indication that Sinclair has center-right Trumpian automatons that are going to be reading Trump press releases in lieu of doing the kind of gold standard journalism you get from the Amazon Post and the New York Times and CNN.
Yeah, when I first saw this, I saw it from Deadspin's Twitter account, and it had something like 30 or 40,000 retweets, so I thought it was going to be something explosive. Watched it, and I just didn't understand what the there was. It's like people didn't know that these TV anchors often just read from a script, and this is just something the company wrote for them, prepared for them, and said this is like our mission statement. It's not much different than what other networks do, but I guess it's the Trump. Everything's about Trump right now. Everything on the left is going to be tied to Trump and be this hysteria, so I guess that's kind of what the story is.
Well, right, and so the indictment seems to me is about the content reverberating through this echo chamber. It's not about having an echo chamber, because as Sinclair executives responded this week, well, boy, we see stories that start on the East Coast about Sinclair that never call us for comment on it and wind up verbatim in West Coast publications. So the idea that there isn't an echo chamber within the Gang of 500, as Mark Halperin termed them, all of the leading lights of political journalism along the Eastern Seaboard that informs the coverage in the rest of the country, of course, is absurd. It's just factually incontrovertible. But Sinclair isn't approaching it the same way from the same ideological perspective, and so they are somehow undermining journalism, even though what we have here, as you said, is really a mission statement. It is not any news reporting that you could assess in terms of its fairness or veracity.
And not a controversial one at that. They're just saying that they need to watch out for false news, which is maybe the president has kind of made that term toxic somehow, but it's a thing that journalists are supposed to do, not share fake news stories.
Well, and it's also the accusation that's leveled back and forth. It's leveled towards conservative outlets by the left, and it's leveled by the president towards outlets that are critical of him, in some cases legitimately. So, I mean, it's this idea that that anybody has the kind of moral high ground here in terms of, I mean, you have these outlets, including the New Yorker, I mean, David Remnick, from the beginning of Trump's term as president. Hey, the normal rules of journalism are suspended. We're into the narrative business now because he has to be stopped at all costs, and so we're suspending the normal rules by which we comport ourselves, which were dubious enough, at that point. I mean, prior to saying, all bets are off.
Yeah, and there's this like level of, I don't want to say pretentiousness, but there's this level of kind of holier than thou attitude that kind of has come up. Maybe it's been in journalism for a while, but in the last 2 years especially. I mean, you remember the Washington Post thing, democracy dies in darkness, like we're fighting to save the First Amendment kind of thing. And then here we have...
And CNN's, this is a banana, this is an apple, an apple's not a banana, and so on and so forth.
And MSNBC has been doing this for 10 years now with lean in, lean forward, whatever their slogan was. There's this kind of attitude that they're saving the First Amendment. All of a sudden there's these news anchors that are just reading a mission statement saying that they're against false news. All of a sudden that's the bombshell. Journalists have been they've been saying all kinds of kind of pompous-ish mission statements about what they do for a while, and this isn't controversial at all. It's just what you said. It's coming from what they perceive as a right.
Right, and it's one of the things too where Sinclair gets a lot closer to transparency than do these does any of the outlets in the leftist echo chamber that pretend that they're just kind of objective scriveners of the passing scene. They have perspectives. I mean, they've essentially conceded them, but then they pretend that they don't. I mean, Vox.com is not left. The New York Times, the Washington Post, they're not left. Of course they are. But they pretend that if you're transparent about advancing a center-right perspective on issues, covering stories they wouldn't cover, covering them from angles different than they would cover them, that somehow you're not a member of the august journalistic community anymore. It's absurd.
And even the newsrooms that do a decent job and they try to play it down the middle. I was a journalism major in college, and they try to drill this into you that you don't go favor one side or the other, and you're just kind of this drone that doesn't have feelings or opinions or anything.
Worldview.
And it makes you lazy. It makes you don't think critically. The work kind of suffers when you kind of try to turn into this drone that doesn't have opinions or feelings or anything.
Right.
Just be upfront about it.
Exactly. Just be transparent. I have a perspective, and and then trust your readers enough and have enough respect for them, or consumers, to say, where Proft's coming from, where Kaiser's coming from, you assess the quality of the story yourself. Here's the other thing, though, too. This is the question I love to put to, all these journalists and professors and stuff. We know from Gallup research that for the last 50 years, between 82 and 94% of the D.C. press corps has voted for the Democrat candidate for president. Fact. Pew Research. Or actually, it's Gallup. I'm sorry, Gallup survey research. So let me ask you this question. Do you think the coverage, the stories chosen, and the angles by which the stories are reported would have been different over the last 50 years if 82 to 94% of the D.C. press corps had been voting for the Republican nominee for half a century? Of course they would. Of course they would, because your perspective informs the kind of reporting you do. And the first way it informs is on this kind of stories you select.
Exactly. Even if it doesn't, I think people assume if it had 90% Republican, it would be, they're going out and only interviewing Republicans, only promoting conservative policies. It's not even that. It informs the stories, like you said, the stories you select, the way you think about things, the way you approach things, and pretending like these people don't have opinions, don't have different world or the same worldview, and newsrooms oftentimes breed a lot of groupthink, is just preposterous. They're people, and they come at these things with a certain perspective.